What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Black Myth Wukong yet again and talk about the insane potential that this game has. Now, we're about a month away. I think things are going to start to get pretty fast, in regards to this game as we get through July, as we get into August, probably more in-depth previews. Obviously, the codes will be going out, and I think people are excited. I think people are ready. And one thing I want to throw into this video that I have seen is, over the last month or two, right, we've seen a lot of previews for this game, and we're starting to get, I think, a little bit more sense of exactly what this game is like, right, where it's a little bit more linear. It's about getting from point to point. At least so far, what people are able to play, it's not insanely packed with enemies to kind of distract you between boss to boss, and that's led to some discussion, right? Where is this a boss gauntlet type thing? And they've even said, well, it's linear, but we want you to go off the beaten path sometimes, and we're gonna have cosmetics and different things that you'll be able to find. I've always likened it in a way, and I want to do that in this video, to Stellar Blade in terms of the potential and in terms of what this game can do. Now, to be honest with you, I think this game could potentially be better than Stellar Blade, but I think both of these games are extremely, extremely alike while also being a little bit different. Black Myth has talked about, the abilities and, different even powers that the character has, right, in terms of transforming and going back and forth, and you can even transform into the bosses in some circumstances. So it's definitely a different game than Stellar Blade, but I liken it in the sense that I think it has a lot of positivity going in, which I think largely Stellar Blade had. The combat seems to be king. I think it's a little different because for Black Myth, I think more has been made on the numbers. I think more has been made on, hey, this game is going to have a ton of bosses. And, if you look to Stellar Blade's, bread and butter, I think it was the combat in general, but perfect parrying, perfect dodging. The bosses were extremely, extremely good. But even enemies, could trip you up from time to time. And Stellar Blade was a little bit more open. They would throw you into a semi-open world map and say, go explore. You have the main quest, you have the side quest, whereas Black Myth is a little bit more funneled. It's got the same idea with the difficulty, right, where Black Myth is going to control its own difficulty on you. You don't get to pick. I think when it comes to the potential, two things we got to, talk about, right, is, well, what is the massive potential to this game? And I think it's a couple things. I think if you want to look at it from sales, which, we've talked about sales on the channel before, ultimately, look, if the game needs to reach a certain amount, I hope it reaches that amount, right? I don't care if it makes 5.1 million sales to 5.2. That's not going to change my life in any way, but I want to see good games rewarded, right? So if this game is an excellent game, I want to see the game sell. So in terms of the potential on that side of things, Stellar Blade did a little bit over 1 million, right? And that was a PlayStation exclusive, and there was a lot of talk for that game. There was a lot of build-up. And I think Black Myth, I kind of go back and forth because I see the massive excitement, and I see a lot of people saying, hey, this might be one of the bigger games of the year. I don't know if those two things are the same. I think this game does have massive excitement. I think this game will sell well, but I don't think this is a game that's going to sell 5, 6, 7 million units immediately. However, let me throw this in, right? If the game puts everything together, and if you're starting to see review scores in the high 8s, and everybody that's playing it is loving this game, word of mouth can carry a game like Black Myth very, very, I truly believe very far, because it's in such a popular genre that is already, kind of flooded with people, right? But it's, again, assumingly going to do things a little bit different, but it's still going to feel familiar, right? So if you have the positive word of mouth where the bosses are incredible, and this is just a good game to play, it's got the challenge, it's got, that kind of stuff to it where you're going to have to be on your toes, but the game's going to help you a little bit, and this and that. The game might actually. So, my gut feeling is the game is not going to just come out and immediately dominate right away, right? I think it would be a little bit more like a slow trickle, like a Stellar Blade. Now, maybe a little bit more because it's on more platforms than Stellar Blade was, but I think it's going to come out and do, 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million, and then word of mouth, if the game is good, can kind of carry it. And then the potential in the other way, more of well, that's the commercial side, right? The sales. From the critic side and how we perceive the game, I think the upside on this game is game of the year potential. Now, right now, Stellar Blade is probably a top 3, top 4 game for me for 2024. I'd love, for Black Myth, which is really kicking off this fall of gaming, right? You got Black Myth and Star Wars, and then you get into September with Astro and so many more games. Black Myth is actually the first game that kind of kicks off this huge wave of heavy hitters. I'd love for Black Myth to immediately make a mark and say, yep, this is a game of the year contender. And I think, a couple of things have to go right for it, right? I think, I mentioned earlier the kind of debate on the bosses versus like the level design and the enemy structure. It's something that they might have made a decision there, right? That's kind of set in stone. And, if it really is just boss, 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 and they don't really let the level breathe, they don't really throw enough of enemies at you to have that pacing that feels right, that can hurt the game. That can hurt the game. But overall, and I guess, again, this is assuming that kind of everything comes together for it. And that's one of the big, I'd say, criticisms or worries of people, at least right now. At least right now is, how are they going to handle the pacing, and is it just a boss gauntlet and stuff? If they can silence those, those claims, I think they're kind of golden. But the potential on that side truly is, I think you'd be looking at one of the better games of the year. I mean, from what we've heard visually, it might be one of the better games of the year just immediately from the visual perspective, but I do think it can absolutely make an impact, and also I guess even like the culture and the development studio and just all that stuff, right? Like, it is important even from that perspective where it's like, if this game does well, a lot of these games like a Stellar Blade, like a Black Myth, a lot of these companies you're noticing they're saying, hey, this is our first console game. Like, we're kind of going all out for it, but we've never done something like this before, and the quality's kind of high, for this being their first attempt. So this, I think, would just kind of signal to others, hey, you can do the same thing. It's almost a cultural type thing where, the potential for this game specifically is, sequels, or just, this is the game of the year contender. Give them a round of applause, right, for nailing it on their first go. But also just from like the culture and, getting more of these type of products, these games, Stellar Blade being successful, I think incentivizes others to do it. You know what I mean? And I think that's good for the gaming industry. We need stuff like that. I think the same thing for Black Myth. So I think the upside is huge. There is, a chance. But at the end of the day, and I don't want to get too much into like review scores and stuff, because I don't put a lot of stock in scores myself. I don't think this game, like, unless it's all been a lie, I don't think this game comes out and is bad. I really don't see a bad game in Black Myth. I see maybe a game that picked its battles, right, and kind of excels at certain things that they wanted to excel at. So I just want to throw that in terms of, I think the game is going to probably be pretty rock solid, at launch. And that's like the low. And at the high is like, oh my God, this game kind of surprises people. This game is getting high scores. This game is a game of the year type contender. I think that's kind of the range you're looking at with Black Myth. So I feel good about it, and I get more excited every day, every week, as we get closer to August. This is a huge game, I think. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.